Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about creating an environment. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, how do you approach this? Is like almost like the exact thing I was talking about earlier. How do you approach creating a safe, supportive, and collaborative and diverse environment in teams? Well, the it really comes down to, are you the sort of person who can build that sort of environment, and do you have a say in who joins the teams, and sort of do you have any control over the people that you're dealing with? Because the way that usually I find at the very least has been working best for me is that you need at least one person, ideally that should be you if you're the team lead or the engineering manager or whoever, who makes it who creates a bit of a relaxed environment to start off with. That's one part. People have to feel that like they're not under the microscope all the time and so forth, and that they have enough trust and so forth to be allowed to express themselves or so forth. As I've said before, if people feel as there's something, if they feel like they stand something to lose, you're never gonna get anything out of them ever. It's the number one thing I give as feedback to higher management when they ask me about because they usually they try to figure out through reports and forms and stuff like that, surveys, if how things are going, and they never like the attendance of these things are like nothing in comparison to what they want. And I keep on telling them that you're never gonna get a serious suggestion in the suggestion box as long as people feel like they have something to lose, or if they don't feel like they don't stand anything to gain from helping you. Never, never, ever, ever. And if you want to create that sort of environment, you have to be a little bit more intimate. And to me, it's usually as simple as that. You have to go out of your way to be someone who is pleasant to deal with, even if you're the tech lead. You have to be the sort of person who people feel like, yeah, I can have a conversation with this person, and it doesn't feel weird, it feels natural, it feels relaxed, and we can have we can talk about work, or we can talk about something off work, etc., etc. It's the sort of person who might not be my best friend, perhaps, doesn't have to be my best friend, but I could go on and off after work with this person and have a beer or whatever, and just have a conversation for an hour or two or something like that, and the conversation feels natural. The better of a conversationalist you are, the easier this is going to be for you to build that sort of trust and rapport with everybody. And usually this is the way it works, if someone takes the first step, other people will follow. And then, as I was saying, you have to control the people, have a certain degree of control over the people that you add, because some people don't want this, some people are different, some people are they won't develop personal chemistry with each other. And it's important for you to have an understanding of the sort of personalities that will fit well together. That's very important. And usually it's not that difficult, because on average most people are very nice, but you can't just pick anybody and put them into a team and then hope that that's going to work. It's important that you create this environment with the first person, the second person, the third person. You have to build up critical mass, and then most people will sort of see that, oh, this is the way things work here. But it starts with you, because you're the person of authority, and that means that the environment that you establish, if you're starting a fresh team, that's the one that's going to stick usually. If there's another way of doing things that has already been established, it's much harder to undo a toxic work environment or something like that than it is to fix it. I would go as far as to say that it's borderline impossible to fix some teams, because the reality is that you might have people who have established a certain way of working where it's so ingrained that it's really a matter of, can you tweak this into something less toxic, or is this sort of a situation where you're going to have to fire some people because they're not going to be able, you're not going to be able to fix the problem with them in the company. And so to build this environment, it really comes down to how good are you at making people feel that it's okay to do the things that they feel they need in order to feel, because it's a lot about feelings, to feel as if this is a well-working team where the developers have incentive to help each other out and collaborate. And to me, that's always comes down to the same playbook. So far, I've run it a number of teams. It always works, in my opinion, at the very least. I always get the same results. Like I can't. It's unreasonable for you to have. You should never, as a tech leader or manager or something like that, think in terms of I want things to work exactly this way. This is the exact thing I need from everybody, because every team is a little bit different. But the core foundation things are very simple to put in place. There are things that you should enforce, like the bare minimum. I'm very much for establishing a set of play rules. Basically, these are the rules of this team. You do these things, and these are the only things I'm going to ask you to do. Everything else is up to you. And those rules are things that are non-negotiable. Like basically, it's sort of like stating an example would be: it is non-negotiable for you to write unit tests. End of line. End of story. There is no, you don't have a say here. And then you basically have to put up a system where this is happening, and you can you can also set up like structures for if there is something you work, say, right to left. In other words, if there is a story that is ready for testing or ready for code review, or like where you have to help somebody else out, you are expected to do that before you pick up the next story or whatever. Like, that is the thing, and you have to communicate this over and over and over and over, and you have to like never let it lie. If somebody ignores it or something like that, you don't have to be aggressive, you don't have to be angry or so forth. You just bring it up every single time and you just point it out. And you can do the crowdsourcing thing where you basically, you know who did it, everybody knows who did it, but you say we. You don't point at a specific person. You're saying this, that we are we're pretty shit right now at picking up stories. I see that the average time that a story is ready for testing or whatever is more than a few days. That's unacceptable. So now we are going to talk about who's going to pick up these stories, and then you start basically forcing people to say in the stand-up, yeah, I'm picking up that story, I'm picking up that story, I'm picking up that story, until this becomes normal. The reason why you want this is because you need to establish these rules, you need to establish an effective working team. Because it's very, very difficult to allow complete freedom for absolutely everything, and then at the end have people be ineffective, if that makes sense, at doing things without any type of structure or anything like that. Because if the team is ineffective and the people in the team feels like this is like a sort of wishy-washy, there's nothing is important, everything sort of goes environment, you will allow bad habits to work their way in very, very quickly. You need some type of structure, and that structure has to be effective, which is the balancing act, which is the thing that comes back to competency usually for the manager. If you don't know how to run an efficiently working software team, it's very difficult for you to establish this sort of environment, because the problem is usually that a supportive and collaborative environment and so forth, you can build that. A lot of it can come from the fact that you're this sort of person, as I was talking about, who kind of embeds the idea of being supportive into your team, if you have the soft skills for it. But if everything is always breaking and everything is always shit, the team is going to suffer for it. So you need both the ability, they both flow together. It's sort of, you can almost think of it as people who have a lot of wealth are on average more likely to donate money and quote unquote do the right thing, because it's not a matter of life or death for them if they are extra nice to somebody who really needs it and so forth. But if you put people in a very scarce environment where everything's always like a lot of corruption, or like they're used to a lot of bad behavior from other people, they're more inclined to be selfish. Not everybody, but on average that is what happens. The same thing happens to a work environment. If the work environment is shit and everybody's always in pain over the fact that everything's so ineffective, that cascades into their personality and their behavior in many cases towards each other. It doesn't always have to happen, but if you want to really strengthen your team, you need to have an efficient working process that is not like extra complicated or redundant or something like that. It has to feel useful, and you have to establish basically a rule set for how do you decide who's going to be in this environment and who's not going to be in this environment, because everybody can't always be in the same environment. You have to have people who have social flexibility enough to build that personal chemistry with each other, because some people are simply not going to be able to fit into a working environment where you want to build this because they do not want to be part of the community, for example. So what I want you to take away from this is that I would suggest that if you want to create a safe, supportive, collaborative and diverse environment, start first and foremost with yourself as the manager or the tech lead. You have to be the sort of person who makes people feel like they can have a relaxed conversation with you and maybe even laugh a little bit at a dumb joke or something like that. If they feel like they can talk and engage with you without being afraid that there's going to be repercussions or something like that, that's the baseline you need to establish. That's number one. Once you get to that point, you have to ask yourself what type of people are going to work with each other fairly well, and then hire and work primarily with people who are going to help you create this environment. Some people are lone wolves, some people don't want to do this, they have no interest, etc., etc. You have to make a judgment call there. Some people, it's not like everybody has to be an extrovert, but you can't have people who are bordering on hostile towards other developers within the team. It's very difficult to create a safe and inclusive work environment if that is the case. And then lastly, make sure that the team is working effectively. Don't just wish you willy-nilly, just tell everybody just kind of do their thing. It's good for you to have an idea of what are the foundation structures that are necessary to create a very a well-working team. Because if you're on the winning team, or you're in a team where you feel like everybody is everybody knows what to do, they feel like, things are pretty much easy here, or everything seems to make sense. It's sort of like children in a sense, like you have to have a curfew, or you have to have some rules, because if you tell them they can do whatever they want, they're going to start acting out and become really bad adults at some point, because you haven't created a mental framework for them for what's correct and what's not correct, which actually has more of a negative impact. The same thing goes for a work environment or any team. You have to help them set up those structures and try to make sure that you don't create a lot of extra process for the sake of process, and that comes down to, as I said before, your competency and your experience with running an effective working team. Have a great day.